November 16, 1951. Captain Dennis Cambell walks onto HMS Illustrious carrying a briefcase. Inside is a single piece of paper with a simple drawing of flight deck angled 10 degrees to the side. It looks so basic that anyone could sketch it. But this simple idea will save more pilot lives than any weapon ever made. Cambell knows the terrible truth. In just the past year, the Royal Navy lost 43 aircraft in landing accidents. 17 pilots died. Dozens more were injured. Every single crash happened in the final 30 seconds of flight, that scary moment when a 30-ton jet going 140 miles per hour tries to catch a wire on a moving deck while a steel barrier waits just 60 feet ahead, ready to destroy any plane that misses. The Americans had it even worse. In 1951, the U.S. Navy had 776 major accidents, more than 2 every single day. During peacetime, the Korean War made things worse. USS Boxer had 7 barrier crashes in one trip. Princeton lost 9 aircraft in 4 weeks. On the old straight-deck carriers, missing the arresting wires meant disaster. You either hit the barrier at full speed, or you crashed into the planes parked up front, creating a fireball that could kill a dozen men instantly. The jet age had arrived, but aircraft carriers couldn't keep up. The new F-9F Panther landed 40 knots faster than the old propeller planes. Worse, jet engines took 7 seconds to speed up from idle, an eternity when you're dropping toward the ocean at 20 feet per second. Landing officers stood on the carrier's side, waving paddles to guide pilots. But by the time a pilot realized he was coming in wrong, it was too late. Physics had already sealed his fate. Every admiral and engineer knew the truth: carrier aviation had hit a breaking point. Jets were the future, but the future didn't matter when the present was killing your people. What nobody knew was that Cambell's crazy idea would be rejected and mocked by the very experts whose job was solving these problems. The breakthrough wouldn't come from committees or fancy testing. It would come from one man who refused to accept that good men should die because of bad design. The trouble started in 1945 when the first jet landed on a carrier. It came in 20 knots faster than any propeller plane, and everyone ignored the warning signs. By 1950, every major navy faced the same crisis. Propeller planes could cut their engines and drop onto the deck. Jets couldn't do that. They had to keep power on until their wheels touched because their engines took too long to speed up if they needed to go around. This created a nightmare scenario. Pilots flew their final approach with engines running, committed to landing, unable to climb quickly if they missed the wires. On a straight-deck carrier, 4 arresting wires stretched across 60 feet of deck. Behind them stood the crash barrier, a web of steel cables meant to catch planes that missed. Behind that were rows of parked aircraft, fuel trucks, and ammunition carts. The math was brutal. A Panther landing at 125 knots covered 211 feet per second. If a pilot missed all 4 wires, he had exactly 2.1 seconds before hitting the barrier. Captain Bruce Williams watched 11 men die when a barrier failed in March 1951. The accident report was cold and factual. Aircraft struck barrier at full power. Barrier broke. Aircraft hit 6 parked planes. Fire reached fuel stores. 14 aircraft destroyed. 11 men killed, 23 injured. Carrier operations stopped for 48 hours. Everyone tried to fix the problem with better barriers. The British developed the flex deck, a rubber landing surface that could supposedly catch jets without landing gear. Test pilot Eric Brown made 40 landings on it. In his official reports, he called it Fundamentally sound. To his friends, he called it bloody terrifying. The Americans built stronger barriers. They spent $3.2 million developing the Davis barrier system, a mechanical web that could stop a 25,000-pound aircraft at full throttle. When it worked, it was impressive. When it failed, the destruction was total. But stronger barriers didn't prevent crashes. They just contained them better. Every senior pilot knew the real problem: the flight deck itself. One captain wrote in 1945, "Current landing procedures force all aircraft into a 60-foot zone with zero room for error. This doesn't work with jet performance. We're trying to land 1952 aircraft on 1942 ships. People will die until we fix this." Everyone agreed. Everyone saw the problem. But nobody could solve it. What they needed was someone crazy enough to question the one thing nobody questioned. Why does the landing area have to run straight down the ship? Captain Dennis Cambell wasn't supposed to solve anything. He was a desk officer. Born in 1907, he joined the Royal Navy in 1925 and became a pilot in 1931. During World War II, he flew torpedo bombers and earned medals. Nobody called him a genius. After the war, they gave him a boring desk job managing paperwork between the Navy and contractors. He had no engineering degree. His job was meetings, schedules, and signatures. But Dennis Cambell had something that degrees can't teach. He couldn't ignore dead pilots. In 1951, he went to the funeral of Lieutenant Michael Lithgow, a test pilot killed when his jet hit the barrier. Lithgow had been Cambell's student. He was 23 years old. He made a perfect approach at perfect speed, but he floated 6 feet too far and missed the wires. The barrier failed. His plane was destroyed. His wife was 5 months pregnant. Cambell stood at that grave and told his assistant, "This is insane. We're killing them with our own equipment. A pilot does everything right and still dies because 60 feet isn't enough room for error. There has to be another way." Most officers say things like that at funerals. But Cambell kept thinking about it. He pulled accident reports. He talked to landing officers. He studied landing patterns. He wasn't an engineer, so he did what regular people do: he drew pictures. The answer came during a train ride from Portsmouth to London. Cambell sketched carrier decks in his notebook, trying to figure out how to give pilots more room. If you can't make the landing area longer, make it wider. If you can't make it wider because the ship has a fixed width, angle it. He drew a flight deck angled 10 degrees to the side. Now the landing zone didn't end at the barrier. It ended in open water. A pilot who missed the wires could push his throttle forward, climb away, and try again. No barrier. No parked planes. No deadly collision. Just air and ocean and a second chance. The idea was so simple it felt stupid. Either he discovered something brilliant, or he missed something obvious that every real engineer already knew. On August 7, 1951, Cambell called a meeting at the Ministry of Supply. He showed them his sketch. The room exploded. "That is completely illegal," said Commander James, a senior flight operations expert. "International aviation law requires all flight operations to align with the ship's axis. What you're proposing violates maritime law written after 15 years of carrier operations. This isn't innovation, Captain. It's amateur nonsense." Cambell had expected pushback. He hadn't expected to be treated like an idiot. James continued, "You're asking pilots to land across the ship's natural motion. Carriers pitch and roll. An angled deck means pilots approach at an angle to that motion. They'll be fighting drift constantly. You'll increase crashes, not reduce them. Then Louis Boddington, a civilian engineer, held up his hand. Show me the math. Calculate the drift problem. An 8-degree angle on a deck moving through 12-degree rolls. What's the drift over a 30-second approach? Silence. Nobody could answer. Then we test it, Boddington said. We paint an angled deck outline on HMS Triumph. We run simulated approaches for a week. If the drift problem is real, we'll measure it. If it's just theory, we'll know that too. The admiral in charge looked at Boddington. Louis, you understand that if pilots start crashing, you're ending both your career and Captain Campbell's? Noted, sir. And if it works, then we stop killing pilots who did everything right. The tests began in September 1951. HMS Triumph left Portsmouth with an angled deck painted in white across her flight deck, not a RAL modification, just paint. For 3 weeks, Navy pilots made practice approaches, pretending the painted line was real. The predicted drift problem didn't exist. Pilots adapted in 2 landings. What they discovered instead was freedom. Test pilot Lieutenant Peter Chilton later wrote, I came in too high and floated past the wires. For the first time in my career, I wasn't terrified. I just added power and climbed away. No barrier waiting to kill me. No aircraft ahead. Just clean air and a second chance. I felt like I'd been given my life back. By October, the painted deck trials proved the concept worked. Now came the hard part, convincing the Americans. September 14, 1951. U.S. Naval Air Test Center, Maryland. British test pilot Eric Brown stands in front of 40 American test pilots and feels every eye calculating whether to trust him. Gentlemen, Brown begins. In the past 12 months, how many of you have hit the barrier? 7 hands go up. Then 12. Then 15. How many of you know someone who died hitting the barrier? Every hand goes up. Brown shows them Campbell's diagram. The room explodes again. You want us to land sideways? The landing officer can't see the approach angle. What about the island structure? Brown waits for quiet. Every objection you just shouted, we had every single one. Then we tested it. And here's what we found. When you miss the wires on an angled deck, you don't die. You add power and go around. Simple as that. Commander Harold Buell stands up. Commander Brown, I've been landing on carriers since 1943. What you're describing violates every principle we've developed through 8 years of combat. You're asking us to throw away proven methods for a British theory. I'm asking you to stop dying for a design flaw. The room goes silent. Brown continues. You're landing jets on straight decks because that's what you have. But straight decks were designed for old propeller planes. Jets can't fly like that. So you're forcing 1952 aircraft into 1942 operations, and your people are dying because of it. After heated debate, the admirals agreed to test the angled deck on USS Midway. If it works, they'll modify one carrier completely. If it fails, they'll bury the idea forever. January 12, 1953. Off the coast of Cuba, Lieutenant Commander Harold Buell brings his Panther jet into the landing pattern behind USS Antietam. This is his first landing on a real angled deck, not painted, but actually built into the ship. Buell doesn't trust it. He's trained his whole career to hit the wires or face the barrier. That fear has saved his life twice. His approach is perfect until a wind gust lifts his plane 6 feet. He's high. He corrects, but now he's long, he's going to miss the wires. On a straight deck, this is where panic sets in. But Buell forces himself to follow the briefing. If you miss, you climb. The deck is clear. Trust it. His wheels hit. He bounces once. His tail hook skips over wire 1, wire 2, wire 3, wire 4. He's missed them all. On a straight deck, the barrier would already be tearing his plane apart. But there's no barrier. Just open deck and clear air. Buell pushes his throttle to full power. His engine speeds up. The Panther lifts. He's flying again. 23 seconds later, he's back in the pattern. Second approach. This time he catches wire 3. Perfect landing. Buell climbs out shaking, not from fear, but from relief he didn't know he'd been carrying for years. He later wrote, "Landing a jet on an angled deck was pure bliss. For the first time in my career, I wasn't afraid of dying during every approach. I didn't realize how much psychological weight I'd been carrying until it was gone." Over the next 60 days, they made 1,327 landings on Antietam's angled deck. They recorded 8 missed wires. On a straight deck, those 8 might have meant 5 barrier crashes, 2 destroyed planes, and 1 or 2 dead pilots. On the angled deck, 0 crashes, 0 destroyed planes, 0 injuries. The numbers were undeniable. Before angled decks, 1950 to 1952, the U.S. Navy averaged 647 major accidents per year. Landing accidents caused 52% of all losses. After angled decks, 1955 to 1957, major accidents dropped to 321 per year. Landing accidents caused only 19% of losses. The reduction, 75% fewer landing accidents, 80% fewer barrier deaths. By 1957, every major aircraft carrier in the Western world either had an angled deck or was getting one. The Soviets initially rejected it. Then, after several deadly crashes, they quietly adopted it in 1959. Their landing accidents dropped 68% within 6 months. Captain John Moore, who flew combat missions over Vietnam, said it best. "I made 947 carrier landings between 1954 and 1973. I missed all the wires 62 times. That's 62 potential barrier crashes. 62 chances to die. Instead, I just climbed away and tried again." Every pilot my age thinks about the friends who died in the 1950s hitting barriers. We're alive because Dennis Cambell drew a line on paper and refused to shut up about it. Captain Dennis Cambell never gave press interviews about the angled deck. He was promoted to Rear Admiral in 1954. When reporters asked for comments, he sent them to the engineers. When the U.S. Navy invited him to ceremonies, he often declined, once because he was attending the funeral of a lieutenant who'd served under him years before. He retired in 1960 and worked as a consultant, always focused on pilot safety. Colleagues remember him slowing down every design review, asking, "What happens if this fails at night in bad weather?" He never cared about odds. He cared about the one pilot who got unlucky. Cambell died in 2000 at age 92. His obituary mentioned the angled deck but didn't capture what it meant. Every carrier landing since 1953 happens because one pilot refused to accept that colleagues should die preventably. Today, every aircraft carrier in the world uses an angled deck. The U.S. Navy's newest carriers have advanced technology, but the deck is still angled 8 degrees to the side exactly as Cambell drew it in 1951. Modern carrier pilots make over 15,000 landings per year across the U.S. Navy's fleet. About 8% miss all the wires, that's 1,200 missed approaches annually. Without the angled deck, those would be 1,200 potential barrier crashes. How many lives saved? Hundreds per year. Over 70 years, tens of thousands. One Marine pilot who flew from 1985 to 2007 hunted down Cambell's family and sent them a letter. I never met your father, but I made 1,147 landings during my career. I missed the wires 42 times. On a straight deck, that's 42 times I might have died. Instead, I just climbed away and tried again. Your father gave me 42 second chances. He gave me a career. He gave me a life. Some breakthroughs don't come from experts. They come from the person who refuses to accept. That's how we've always done it. As an answer, Captain Cambell wasn't an engineer. He wasn't a test pilot. He was a desk officer who couldn't ignore dead friends. He had the courage to draw a simple line on paper and ask, "Why not?" The angled deck saved more lives than any medal winner. It changed naval warfare more than nuclear power or guided missiles. But it didn't come from committees or labs. It came from a train ride, a notebook, a sketch, and the refusal to shut up when everyone said it was impossible. That's the real story. That's why it matters. Because the next Dennis Cambell might not be an admiral or an engineer. Might not have degrees or credentials. Might just be someone who sees a problem everyone accepts and refuses to accept it. History doesn't always belong to the loudest voices or the highest ranks. Sometimes it belongs to the one person who won't let good people die for bad design.